Hello and welcome to this end of the year question and answer session for the Culture Jinni channel, my viewers. In this session I will answer the questions that you have posted in the community Q&A community post for this year. So let's get started with Nikhil Sanaka, who asked 3 questions. The first one is, what historical period or event fascinates you the most and why? And 2, how do you think studying history can help us understand the present and shape the future? And 3, is there a particular historical figure or movement that you find particularly underrated or overlooked and why? Let's start with the first question about which period or event that fascinates me the most. Well, there exist a lot of civilizations, periods of history and singular events that are interesting, and that I sometimes prefer more than others, depending upon time and mood. Though generally, I would say, considering that I, outside of this channel, have worked with and studied Arabic history, that I would say that the Abbasid period in the Middle East, but particularly the first centuries of it, is the period that I find the most interesting, as it was a period of great changes. And it's also a pretty well documented period, with lots of manuscripts, especially for being early medieval history. And it's a period with a lot of major changes in Arabic civilization that are happening during this period. It's really during this period when you get the foundation, or rather the formation, of what is going to be reoccurring themes in Islamicate or Islamic civilization. The early Abbasid period of the first 3 centuries is very much the foundation for Islamic Arabic civilization, where it solidifies into a form that is recognizable for us today in many regards, though it was still a period with a lot of differences from today. And you also have a lot of happening with regard to Islam during this period. You have the development of the Islamic Hadith canons, you have fiqh and aqidah schools of Islamic thought developing, and you also have the so-called golden age of Islamicate Arabic science happening at this time, with the development of new mathematics, new forms of chemistry, new forms of medicine and the like happening in the Middle East. It's a period of very clear civilizational development at a pretty early age, but still has a lot of sources for it, unlike, for example, the high points of the Roman Empire, where we lack a lot of sources about it, and we do not have nearly the same amount of manuscripts due to the fact that paper was developed around this time. Before that, you only had manuscripts in parchment and papyri before. So the existence of paper really make the Abbasid period well documented in comparison to a lot of other empires and periods before that period. As for a singular event that fascinates me, this one is hard since there are so many events in human history that are important and that could be considered to be the most fascinating for me. And you also have the problem that events usually do not happen in a vacuum. There are usually a greater context around events, which makes it very hard to discuss my favorite or the event that I find most fascinating without going into those contextual reasons for it. If I could go into prehistory, I would say that the most important event that happened in human history was probably the invention of agriculture, the Neolithic revolution, where people went from being hunter-gatherers to settled peoples, which created the foundation for civilization, culture, and later developments. If we have to go to the time where we have written evidence about things, then I would say it would be the development of the first scripts by the Sumerians, because the invention of writing is what propelled entire civilizations into being, what made it possible to spread and conserve information for a distance and through generations in a way that was not possible before, with only the spoken word. And that, I think, is probably the most important and fascinating event of human history. Do you also have a lot of other singular, more personal events too that are important in history? For example, the rise of Muhammad and the rise of Islam. Before that, you also have Jesus preaching and, the history of Christianity, how it got adopted into the Roman power structure during the reign of Constantine is also very fascinating and a pivotal moment in Western history. You have a lot of singular, very important events that are fascinating. So I can't probably say just one singular event that is the most fascinating here. But it's certainly true that history is filled with very fascinating and interesting events that you could speak about for hours. Which, in order to keep these Q&A somewhat briefer, I will not go into detail about. Now for your second question, Nikhil. How do you think studying history can help us understand the present and shape the future? This is one of those questions that would almost be good enough, or rather it is a question that is good enough to make an entire video about it. So I might do that in the future, just to, make a video discussing the importance of learning history. As you can go into a lot of detail here, and into a lot of various aspects that are not very obvious from the start. But if I was to answer this briefly, I would say that history is about making connections to the past. For example, seeing how various traditions, for example legal traditions, that started in the past still affect our societies and how we are influenced by previous decisions done by previous people many generations ago. I mean, the great religions like Islam and Christianity started for over 1,000 years ago but still affect our lives to this very day. And legal concepts from both the Sharia and from even old ancient Roman law is still applied in various states and in various places all around the globe. So these things have an effect on us. What happened in the past is not separate from us. With that said, with regards to understanding the past and how it connects to us, it's also about understanding how vastly different societies can act and be, and how the past is different from us. The old medieval Arab world, for example, might still be Arabic civilization, but it is still vastly different from the modern day Arab world. And if we are to talk about Western European civilization, it is not the same as Roman civilization. Not at all. Those are two different civilizations, even if we have borrowed a lot from Roman civilization. We are so different from them that you could see us as two different civilizations if you consider yourself Western. This is also why I've made a lot and intend to make a lot more videos about Roman history, focusing upon Roman society, because I want to bring home just how very different Roman society was from what we consider to be European civilization, even early medieval European civilization, because Roman society was so vastly different from us that it's hard to even understand that if you have not gone into and been told about all of the various aspects about their regular society. A society that had vastly different values about what is proper and improper from later European civilization. And I want to bring home these differences in my videos, because differences between societies historically are important to study. And it's important for understanding ourselves and understanding how we act and what is our uniqueness and what is our similarity. As this can maybe help us understand that things can be done differently in various ways, and that various societies act and react differently depending upon various happenings, or they react and act similarly to us, and thus we get greater insight into human nature and human behavior. And these things are very important for the present and for the future. Now, for your third question. Is there a particular historical figure or moment that you find particularly underrated or overlooked, and why? Well, I would say that it depends really much upon which continent and area you are looking at. For European history, I would say generally that late Roman history and early medieval European history is underrated, but that is mostly because of a lack of sources from those periods. That makes it so that it becomes underrated and overlooked. And similarly, in the Middle East and its history, I would say the history of the Umayyad period and the Seljuk period are kind of underrated. And again, there is also an issue of sources, especially for the Umayyad period. But less of a fact that the sources don't exist, and more of a fact that it has not been looked into as much due to various factors, as there are issues of sources being hard to understand due to either not being in Arabic or being in a sort of Arabic that is hard to interpret due to different scripts and due to different language use, or few sources existing in certain periods of the Umayyad period. And you also have the fact that, for example, during the Seljuk period, you have a lot of manuscripts in different languages, as you have a lot of Persian and Turkic language manuscripts too, and not just Arabic, which makes these periods hard to study and somewhat hard to grasp if you are not skilled in several different languages. The Umayyad period also have several various scripts of Arabic, which creates a similar problem of understanding the sources. And this is the case when the sources are not written in other languages that are not Arabic, such as in Greek or Persian. You also have the fact that the Umayyad period kind of gets in the shade of the Rashidun Caliphate before it, and in the shade of the later Abbasid period, making it a period that kind of gets overlooked a lot of the time. And this is even academically, because most academic historians of the Middle East actually focus upon the Abbasid period if they are medieval historians. Similarly, the Abbasid period also kind of overshadows the later Fatimid period and the even later Seljuk period of Middle Eastern history. And I say this as someone that loves the Abbasid period. So this is not me disliking the Abbasid period for doing this, but it's simply stating what I see is a problem of underrating the Umayyad period due to the splendor of the Abbasid period, or underrating later medieval periods in the Middle East, such as the Fatimid period and the Seljuk period. But going back to the Umayyad period, I actually have a video planned. I have not yet written the entire script for the video, but I have written a skeleton script for the video, where I will discuss how the Umayyad period has been overshadowed by other interests in history, and why the Umayyad period is underrated. And I actually began with this idea before you wrote this question. So I will probably get into more depth about why the Umayyads are underrated and why that is problematic in a later video on this channel. Though I do have so many videos planned through already written scripts and or recorded audio and or made into rudimentary videos already, that it might be a while until I will discuss the underrated nature of the Umayyad Caliphate. But I intend to do that in the future. Speaking about a matter being underrated, though this is not a figure or an era, but rather a focus that I think is underrated in a lot of popular history and that I think would be important to discuss more with the broader public, and that is history connected to administration, law, and the development of institutions, rather than a focus upon wars and great individuals or singular events, because civilizations, empires, and states are held together by institutions and by administrations and legal laws that develop through history and bind society together and form society and make great things possible for the individuals within society. Now, the problem is that it's hard to make bureaucracy or the development of institutions and hierarchies into something interesting for popular history. But nevertheless, I think it's a very overlooked aspect of history that we need to concentrate more upon, because so many other things in society are dependent upon these things. Even to a certain degree, economics, though people place a lot of focus upon, are in certain ways a reflection of the possibilities of society made manifest through various institutions that guarantee the conditions that make various types of economies possible. See, for example, my video about why slave societies are advanced societies. For example, about the various factors that need to exist in a society in order for a society to be a slave society that utilizes mass slavery. With this said, it's very hard to make good, engaging videos for normal people about these matters, and that is why it is usually overlooked and underrated, I think. Even if it is a very important aspect of history that needs to be more focused upon, and information about these various subjects related to the development of institutions, administrations, and their role in history needs to be spread, which I try to do on this channel at times. As for a singular person that I think is underrated in history, I will just say Abdul Malik, the fifth caliph of the Umayyad Caliphate, was actually pretty important when it comes to instituting a lot of institutions, laying the groundwork for things that would develop later, such as centralizing the bureaucracy of the Umayyad Caliphate and remaking the administration of the Umayyad Caliphate and making Arabic the official administrative language for all bureaucrats of the Umayyad Caliphate. And I do also intend to make a video about him also in the future. Abdul Malik also has a lot of competition from a lot of other important historical persons in Middle Eastern history. So this was just one name that came to mind quickly as being underrated, but I would not say the most underrated, just particularly underrated in comparison to his importance. Now it is time to move on to the next person having asked questions, the Dead Warrior. Congratulations for reaching 1000 subs. Oh, thank you, the Dead Warrior. Also, great content you have been making in the last year. Oh, it makes me glad that you enjoy it. I think it's great. Thank you so much. I hope you continue making such great videos. Be assured I will. So my questions are, would there be more videos covering the Roman era history? If so, can you give us sneak peeks? What is the process of making your videos and how you manage to make them? And what is your favorite sport? Yes, I have a couple of videos with regards to Roman history planned. They are right now in the fully written script stage and not actually made videos. But hopefully, videos will come out this year about Roman history. Hopefully in the time of summer. And these videos will be about Roman ordinary life and culture and aspects about that. As I think there is an importance of showing how different the Romans were as a civilization from more modern peoples. And in order to show how Roman life was for ordinary people. In a way that is often overlooked as we usually focus upon the Roman Empire's largeness, its wars, or its greater politics, rather than the society that underlies the entirety of the Roman state or collective civilization that existed in antiquity. And as for the process of making my videos, first I think about some sort of idea or theme that I would like to make a video about. Then I try to make it more precise into something that I can easily make a shorter video about, shorter being about 15 minutes. If I think an idea will take substantially longer than just 15 minutes, then I will usually divide that idea into smaller ideas for future videos. For example, my video about the Swedish saint holiday of Lucia, and then 1 year later, my video about the Lussevaka, the Lucia vigil, afterwards, could have been made into a greater theme or video about Lucia, but I wanted to divide it into smaller videos in order to create shorter, more precise and detailed videos that were more concise. But before you can make a video, you have to make a script, and in order to make a script, you need to have information and knowledge about what you are making a script about. Sometimes I can use my own historical knowledge and experience, if applicable, to make a video easily. But sometimes I have to search for information and search for sources in order to make a video. And thus, I will look at main works associated with this field of study, and often look in the references of these main works in order to find other works associated with this field of study, and thus get a better picture about the entire field and about the specific object or time period, area, or practice that I'm studying for the video, to make the script for the video. And often I combine this with my general knowledge in history and my previous studies in various other fields of history or the study of religion and other university studies within the humanities that I have done previously. Sometimes, if I really have issues with a subject or something that I'm studying for a video, I actually ask for help from various experts that I know in these fields to give me pointers on where to search for information. For example, the video about Thanksgiving in the USA, since I am not good at American history, I was actually helped by a friend of mine to know where to search for sources and to get some of the sources for that video, as he is a guy with a background in the study of American history. He knows generally the greater fields of study in that part of human history and thus could help me, a guy that mostly does medieval Arabic history, to point me in the directions on where to search for various sources. And then when you have gotten all of the sources, both primary sources, secondary sources and various literature connected to this piece of history or this sort of practice that you are going to make a video about, then you have to understand them and interpret them in order to make a script. Here you need to consider reliability, likelihoods of being true, various previous interpretations of the subject matter, and various things of consideration that are specific to this subject matter. Sometimes even just the bare matter of understanding the sources can be hard. For example, regarding the video of Thanksgiving in the USA, I had to read these old handwritten English manuscripts, where names and words were spelled differently in the same manuscript at several occasions. Not to mention that I'm not used to read handwritten English from the 17th century, though I am used to actually read handwritten medieval Arabic manuscripts. And there are actually some techniques you can use from interpreting handwritten Arabic manuscripts on other types of scripts that are handwritten. Like looking at reoccurring patterns of writing in order to determine the letters, looking at certain reoccurring stylistic things in the script and isolating them and thus using them as a base of interpretation and so on. But having said that, having had to interpret these old English manuscripts, I feel blessed by the fact that Arabic had a pretty early standardization of the language, because the spelling of old English words and names were pretty changeable and malleable and subject to personal style and choice. And this made it a challenge to interpret them. Though it did prove to be a pretty interesting challenge that I actually liked, so it was not all bad. At least I had access to the sources in this case. In some cases I had to search for the sources and never actually gotten to the sources, or had to wait a long time in order to get access to them. But once you have gotten most of the sources and gotten the information that you feel is sufficient to make a script, you have to write the script, where you have to order everything that you want to take into your video, and you have to decide what to leave out of the video because it isn't as important, and you need to keep the script manageable and focus upon the most important aspects and make it concise. Or you have things that you think would be better discussed in another video due to various reasons of complexity, or various things that you want to add to that would take away from the main point of this video. And you also have to make the script flow naturally to a certain degree as you write it. When I write my script, I write parts where I write exactly what I will say, and also I have parts where I write more auxiliary words and sentences where I will speak about themes generally just from my heart, because that's a good way to get out and make the video natural and not as robotic as if you write everything in one script that you just copy with your voice. Also, it is a good way to notice absurdities in various scripts that you have written, because when you have to speak freely about it, you begin to realize certain issues with your knowledge that aren't as apparent when you just write it down and then mechanically just repeat it. This is in the voice recording stage. But before that, when you think you have a ready script, you have to find public domain images and video clips related to the subject discussed, or to film and photo stuff yourself, which I've done at various times in various videos. I have also made use of AI generated pictures and the editing process of changing them in order to fit various videos. So that is another source of footage for my videos. But if you do not get any appropriate footage for the subject discussed in the video, then you might do reconsiderations, as I have done, to change the script before you record it, to better fit the footage, or you might delay recording the script until you have gotten appropriate footage. As a video is both sound and what you see, the visual part is actually pretty important when you make a video, after all. But let's say you're done with gathering all the footage. Then you will record the sound. And considering that I sometimes move my location due to various factors in real life, I sometimes have to record in various environments. And thus, my recording devices and where I record are somewhat different at different times. This is why sometimes my voice is a bit different. But you have to do it when you have time to do it, because you have to have the time to re-record your voice if you say a line in a mistaken way, or you say something that you didn't intend to say, or something like that. It doesn't help that I am not a native speaker of English, and thus pronounce things wrongly sometimes. And then you have the places where you have to shift between various languages, from English to Swedish or to Arabic, and thus you usually aren't that much in the game of that new language. So you make mistakes in the pronunciation in those languages as well, because you were so focused on pronouncing English correctly that you then made mistakes when you were speaking another language or using terms from another language. And you also have the fact that you have to do various sound editing in Audacity as well, cutting away things or changing the voice at various moments in the speech due to various reasons, or for dramatic effect in the video and the like. Anyway, once you're done recording the script and having gathered all the various footage that you are going to use in the video, then you will edit it all together in a video editing program, and I use OpenShot for this, which is a freeware video editing program that I like to use, in which I add, for example, text, if I need it, or I add various effects to the video, and I add the pictures and the other footage together with the sound, and I also add music, stock music that I like to use, to the videos in the background, and I make the video. And this entire process takes a lot of time. But that is why I always dedicate at least an hour, if not more than that, usually more than that, each day to these videos. So I actually sacrifice a lot of time to make them. But I think it's actually fun to make them. And it's also fun to see that you, my viewers, and my subscribers like them. And it warms my heart, even if I do not get extremely big. As long as someone is viewing them, I feel that I have at least managed to make something good. And it also helps a bit when I make these videos that I have a lot of pre-knowledge in a lot of the subject matters that I do discuss, which brings the time needed down a lot. And I'm also pretty good at editing things together in a quick way due to using various shortcuts and quick editing methods that I've learned through making videos, and by having looked up various methods to make videos easier. And currently, as of the time of this video recording, I make about 1.5 videos each week, which means that I make more videos than I release each week. So I always have a buffer of videos that I can release those weeks when I do not have the time to dedicate to video making. And currently I have a buffer about 30 to 40 videos ahead. So I have a pretty large buffer. And also reversely, when I have a lot of free time and I do not have a lot of real life work to do, I can dedicate more time to making videos and thus make more than just one video each week. Actually, my highest number of longer videos made in a week, 5 videos a week during a vacation week. And in order to not get burnt out making videos, I usually shift between various different videos and various different subjects in the videos. So I always do a new thing when I feel tired of doing one type of video. And thus I have several videos that are not finished but are in various states of completion. Some are just skeletal scripts that aren't finished scripts. Some are finished scripts. Some are just voice recordings of already finished scripts. Some are mostly done videos with just a little bit of video editing remaining. And some are just some corrections remaining to them. And that is how I make videos and how I manage to make my videos. And I hope that answered your questions, the Dead Warrior, even if my answer became a bit long and drawn out. Also, regarding the last question, what's my favorite sport? I would say weightlifting. And it is an activity that I do regularly, several times each week. And now we have the Ordinary Historian. Congratulations on 1K. Well, thank you, Ordinary Historian. I'm very happy for having reached 1K, and I'm also very thankful for you due to our various collabs, where I've helped you with the scripts and also recorded some of your scripts, and in turn allowed me to get some exposure from your channel. I'm very thankful for that. It has aided me on this journey to get over 1K. But let's continue on to your question. Will there be future videos talking about ancient China and Japan? Maybe. I do not have something planned right now, and China and Japan have not really ever been any major focus of mine. Though, with that said, with regards to China, I do find the legalism of Shangyang to be fascinating, as well as the general history of the Qin Empire to be very fascinating as well. And I might do a video about those two things in the future. And as for Japan, I find Oda Nobunaga interesting, as well as the Meiji Restoration to be highly fascinating. And I might look into these things and make something about it in the future. But currently I have no plans about it. And it's also the fact that, again, this isn't my expertise. and it's very far away from where I usually focus. But I do find some things from Asia fascinating, like the legalism aspect, because it's so connected to administration and to the creation of the administrational history of various Chinese dynasties. And I do think that that is very interesting. So I have some insight into it, but nothing major. And if I have to make videos about this, then I will have to ask a friend of mine to help me, maybe, when I do this, that knows a lot more about Chinese history than me. And the same thing is also true with regards to Japanese history, where I think that both the history surrounding Oda Nobunaga, a Japanese warlord and unifier of Japan, has a very interesting history surrounding him and his context. And the Meiji Restoration, with the removal of the shogunate power and the restoration of imperial authority and the creation of modern Japan, or rather the laying of the groundwork of modern Japan, is also a very fascinating thing. But again, I'm not that certain I'm good enough in terms of knowledge, at least right now, in order to make history about it. And if I'm to make history about it, I have to read a lot more, and in order to do that, I have to ask someone to give me some guidance in order to go to the best secondary sources about these, such as translations, and or go to people that are knowledgeable and have read the primary sources. Because I can't read or write either Japanese or Chinese. I don't have any knowledge of those languages, so I will have to use translations if I'm ever going to go to any source. And I will probably more rely upon others' various opinions about the history surrounding these things that I mentioned. Thus, if I ever make videos about matters related to ancient China and Japan, it will be when I've made a lot of secondary research, and that will mean that it will be in the far future. Though with that said, I do try generally to accommodate people's requests for specific types of history, as far as it is possible and without sacrificing historical rigor. And I, as a historian, even if I am only a YouTube historian, do not want to spread misinformation or give the wrong picture about what happened in the past. And I feel I can only avoid doing that when I have a firm grounding in a subject matter, or where I can check the sources more directly myself, which I can't do with Chinese or Japanese history, and thus I need to have a broader background knowledge in various secondary sources and in literature that deals with this history in order to confirm what really happened through reading and listening to and comparing various experts and their opinions about various events and the history and their arguments regarding this history. So yes, I might do Japanese and Chinese history, but it will be in the far future if I ever do it. Now over to the next. Ushmadand has 4 questions. First, why do you choose to study the history of the Middle East? 2. What inspires you to pick the topics of your videos, excluding fan suggestions, if you do take those? I don't remember. 3. Why did you start making content on YouTube? And 4. Was there a video you wanted to make but decided ultimately not to? If so, why? Let's begin with the first question. Why do you choose to study the history of the Middle East? I would say that it began with just a general interest in history before I went into university. And the Middle East has historically been a very important region. Also, my interest regarding the role of religion in society, and particularly Islam, also grew through the years, due to personal reasons and also due to all the events that were happening on the news as I grew up regarding the Middle East and things related to Islam. Me being 30 years old, I remember the news about 9/11, then later all the news about the American wars in the Middle East, and you also have the fact that I grew up around some Arabic speakers when I was young as well. And I know this is going to sound very silly when I mention it, but some of my favorite games when I grew up were the Prince of Persia series as well. And Medieval Total War 2, where I usually played one of the Middle Eastern factions. I also remember at the end of elementary school that I had actually decided to read through a translation of the Quran as well. So there was a lot of factors and even an interest before I entered university later. Then I entered university and I began to study general history. But I also began to study Arabic at university as well because I was interested in the language. And I had already learned a lot of other languages before I began to study Arabic. And I felt that Arabic would be a decent challenge to learn and interesting to study. And I eventually managed to get a bachelor's degree in Arabic. I would later go on to study for a master's degree after that. And in parallel with learning Arabic, I shifted the focus of my history studies to the Middle East and the Arab world in particular. And then I went on to write my bachelor thesis and then later my master thesis in subject matters related to Abbasid Arabic history. And today I still continue to study Arabic history and work with it, even if the work opportunities are not always the very best in the field, so to say. Now your second question. What inspires you to pick the topics of your videos, excluding fan suggestions if you do take those? I don't remember. I will answer this that I do indeed take fan suggestions and have actually done a few videos about various things that were suggested by fans, or things close to it. The recent video about the early groups within Christianity was due to a fan request about a video about Christian groups. And some of my videos about Roman culture and history are examples of fan suggestions as well that I've taken and made videos about. But mainly when it comes to picking topics for my videos, I usually pick them based upon knowledge that I have learned over the years studying history and other subjects at university. Mainly just ideas or things from Middle Eastern and especially pre-modern Arabic history, as that is my field of study outside of making videos in real life. And also I take ideas from what I encounter in my daily life. For example, my videos about various Swedish traditions and Swedish history. And sometimes I just get ideas for something interesting. I think about something that was different in the past, or something interesting that I think is related to culture or religion, and then I just write a script about it because I think it would be interesting to discuss. As sometimes I just come across interesting things that I might want to discuss and thus make a video about it that will be uploaded on this channel. And sometimes it is a matter of fact that I search for information about a video topic that I'm interested in, but I end up finding other things that I find are interesting, and then I write it down for future videos. So some of the topics that appear in my videos appear due to the fact that I have found something interesting when I searched for something else. So one thing led to another with regards to topics. In real life, I'm also active in certain circles where we usually have a very broad breadth of subjects that are discussed, and sometimes I take inspiration from there as well. For example, at times I've taken inspiration from higher university seminars intended for doctoral students and professors in various fields, and I've gotten some ideas from there as well. I'm also very open for various topics, which sometimes can be pretty problematic because not all topics are easy to make into visual videos. But as long as it is somewhat interesting, and I think that others might find it somewhat interesting, I will make a video about it to the best of my ability. Question number 3. Why did you start making content on YouTube? I did it because I wanted to make informative, educational content about history, culture, and religious stuff. And I think a lot of the informative content on YouTube is either overly simplified and popularized in order to be easily sold as a video for the viewers, but due to this loses a lot of its educational value, and sometimes even worse, becomes downright misinformation. Or the content is overly dry and too loaded with academical terms, which makes it hard for outsiders to understand it or find it interesting. So I aimed to create some sort of content that could be best described as popularized academical studies in video format. Though ultimately I would say that I make these videos just for the fun of spreading knowledge. Though the fun part is actually very important, and it is why I'm not only making videos about Islam, the Middle East and Arabic history, as I feel that it would not be that fun for myself. It would get a bit boring for myself, as imagine you have worked with Arabic history, studying it during the day for your real life commitments, and then afterwards you are supposed to make videos about Arabic history too after that. It becomes too much. So sometimes I like to focus upon other subjects than those things due to the fact that I feel it becomes too much otherwise for my life. And variety is the spice of life after all. So I would simply say that it's just for the fun of spreading knowledge about various subjects and interests of mine. Though of course I wouldn't be opposed to greater success on YouTube, even to the point of making it into a career, but that would be secondary to the fun of spreading knowledge, of making people understand various cultural, historical and religious traditions and happenings that I think are important to know about. Now over to your fourth and last question. Was there a video you wanted to make but decided ultimately not to? If so, why? Well, there have been a couple of videos where I've researched things and then it has turned out to not be correct what I first assumed and what was the background for the video. Or it was something that I did not feel that I was sure about enough to make statements about. Because it turned out to be more contested or disputed than I thought, and I did not feel that I wanted to make a statement either way about the subject. And thus I did not make a video about it. At other times I've not been making videos because I've not been able to get the necessary material for the video. Not been able to get the sources, and thus have had to put the video idea on hold. For example, a video about early Quran-only movements in Islamic history was put on hold, which by the way was a requested video by a fan, was put on hold because I couldn't get the necessary material. I still plan to make that video in the future when I can get my hands on it. I wanted this material as part of my argumentation for certain aspects of that video. So I put the video on hold until I've gotten the material, where I can make more definitive statements with greater certainty. There was also a script about early Islamic jurisprudence that was put on hold due to similar reasons of not getting a hold of source material for that video. There have also been video ideas where I've thought that it would be better to make other videos before I make this video, because I think background information was needed and it was needed to be given in a previous video. Thus, I had skipped over making this video in favor of making other videos before that. Or I skipped over the entire idea because it would have required too much work with too many videos, and or it would have become too huge to discuss appropriately in certain regards. Especially considering that I have a lot of real life work and studying to do at the side, so I can't dedicate my entire life to just making videos. And I have to find a balance between work and making videos. Though sometimes it's also a matter of other types of time constraints. For example, with the recent conflicts regarding Israel-Palestine, I thought about making a video about it. Though I was very hesitant to do so due to the nature of it almost always causing flame wars in the comment section and various issues of controversy. And I also felt that, considering that if I have to do it now, recently with all of these events, then it risks maybe becoming sloppy because I need to put it out quickly. And I felt that it would be too opportunistic and that the method deserves a more thorough planning and going through it in a much more complex and detailed way than I would have been able to do on the short notice when the conflict erupted into a more intensive conflict. And if I am ever going to do anything related to this conflict, I want to do it very thoroughly. All the attention that I feel is necessary in order to describe this conflict in an appropriate way, without falling into the pitfalls of too simplified histories or making wrongful statements that I might regret later having made. So I put that video idea on hold. And I might in the future do something about the Israel-Palestine conflict, but it's a conflict I try to avoid generally, as I mostly prefer pre-modern history above modern Middle Eastern history. And that was my answer to your questions, Ushmadand. I hope you found my answers satisfactory. And now we have the last poster of questions with the Chancellor of History, with 2 questions. The first, why did you choose your name? More specifically, why the Jinni? And 2, what time period do you despise and try not to make videos on? Jinni is the original Arabic word for jinn, a singular Jinni, several jinn in Arabic. And the jinn are important creatures in Islamic thought and in Arabic folklore. And I thought of it as a fun reference to the idea that my channel would be dealing with Middle Eastern history and culture stuff, though studying and working with medieval Arabic history in real life has made it so that my channel became less about that than I originally intended, as it pushed me towards making videos about other things in my free time, as it becomes kind of boring of doing the same thing in your free time as you're doing during your work and study time. Do I still make videos about the Middle East and Islam and things related to it, so it's not entirely outside of the scope that I intended for this channel. In fact, every second or third video on this channel is generally about either the Middle East, the Arab world specifically, or about Islam and subjects connected to these things. So I do still think that the Culture Jinni as a name is a good reference to the focus of this channel, even if I do at times do other stuff on this channel that is not related to the Middle East, the Arab world, or to Islam. As for your second question, what time period do you despise and try not to make videos on? I do not really despise any period of history, in fact. I think that they all are interesting in certain ways, but I do prefer pre-modern history personally, because it is so very different than modern industrialized history. It's a very different world before industrialization. And there is also the fact that I think that World War II is getting too much of a focus when it comes to modern history. There happened a lot of other very important things in modern history, least of which is not the prequel of the Second World War, the First World War, which I think is highly underrated. And also what happened after the Second World War, with the Cold War and everything around that. And you also have the entire industrialization process before the World Wars as well, which I think is even more important. And I think the overfocus on World War II is kind of problematic, because not only does it create a kind of limited view of history when we overfocus upon the Second World War, but it also has kind of made the Second World War go into a vacuum where it kind of lacks the greater context that I think is very important to describe that event, or that series of events rather. And then you have other issues with the dominance of the Second World War for modern history, where it has also affected the political vocabulary and how people speak with regards to politics and history, where I think that the over-focus upon the Second World War has made us miss a lot of nuances in politics and created situations where we accuse each other of being like the Nazis or the fascists in overly exaggerated ways. Though this is kind of beside history as a subject, and I'm going into politics, but it's kind of unavoidable when we are discussing these things. But I think that the Second World War and the overfocus upon certain aspects of it has made it so that we have lost a lot of nuance in a lot of ways, and we have lost a lot of appreciation for other types of history that are equally important, in my opinion. Though, with that said, I do not despise history about the Second World War. I just think that there are some problems associated with it, especially when it comes to popular history. I'm also not averse to actually make videos about the Second World War, and I might do that in the future. I have already made other videos about modern history on this channel, so it would not be that out of the ordinary for me to make a video about the Second World War in, for example, North Africa, as I'm not against making videos about various subjects related to modern history. And this includes the Second World War, but also other things outside of the Second World War. Though with this said, there are some subjects that I've tried to avoid mentioning on my videos on this channel. The Israel-Palestine conflict is one such subject, and it's also modern history, where I try to avoid it due to the potential it has to cause enormous flame wars and massive controversies that are not constructive for learning and knowledge spreading. And I hope these answers answered your questions, Chancellor of History. And that marks the last of the questions sent from you, my dear viewers. I'm happy that you sent me these questions for this Q&A session. This question and answer session, as I love interacting with you, my viewers, and it was interesting answering your questions. And I hope you have found my answers satisfactory. The next Q&A session will either be at the end of the next year or once I have reached over 2,000 subscribers this time. But also know, my viewers, that I'm always open for various questions about my videos and about other things if you comment in the comment sections of my videos, where I will respond to you in text as soon as possible, as I have an ideal of being an interactive educational YouTube channel where I will interact a lot with you, my viewers, when you post things on my videos. And now I hope to see you in the comment section of this video and in my future videos. See ya, my viewers! Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities.
اشتركوا بالقناة من فضلكم.